Welcome to Doc Discussions with Dr. Jason Edwards, brought to you by St. Luke's, St. Louis.
Hello, this is Jason Edwards, and this is Doc Discussions. I'm here with Dr. Julie Gould. Dr. Gould did a previous podcast with us when we talked about hormone replacement therapy, but today we wanted to talk about something a little bit more personal. Julie, you were diagnosed with cancer relatively recently. Can you share your journey through your cancer diagnosis?
Sure. And that's really why I'm here today, just because there are so many people that were caught off guard by their diagnosis, like I was. So traditionally through life, I had always been the person that, exercised and had their labs checked regularly and didn't microwave plastics and, did all the things that you try to avoid when you don't want to have cancer. And my kids constantly would sit there and laugh at me because I'm like, don't do that. That causes cancer. Don't eat that. No pepperoni. You're going to get colon cancer. So I was always that person that was very cautious of it. And then, I live in a house where, there's kids that eat their Cheez-Its and my husband does whatever he wants and doesn't really, pay attention to a lot as far as when it comes to diet. And they're very nonchalant about it. And so I always kind of thought I'd be the person that lives forever, though. So when I got the diagnosis, I was really kind of beside myself because I was like, no, I'm the one that's going to live forever, though. I'm the one that is going to be 90, and this was such a shock for me. But the way that it started was actually I was on a ski trip and just taking a shower, shaving, and I felt a lump in my armpit. And this was actually 2 weeks after I got the second COVID vaccine. And so none of us knew anything about COVID vaccines, but we did know that it does make your lymph nodes get enlarged, though, for a little while. Yeah. So I kind of chalked it up to that for a little while. And so I watched it for, a couple weeks and I was like, no, it's still there. And my husband's a physical therapist. I kind of was like, hey, this is kind of weird. Do you feel this? And he's like, yeah, I feel it. He was like, do you have it on the other side? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't think I feel anything. And for a physical therapist, especially a manual therapist, they have really good hands. He's like, no, you have it on the right side too. And I was like, that's weird. If I got the vaccine, I would have thought that it would be on just the side that I got the shot in my arm. So I decided to sign myself up for a mammogram because I'm like every physician and I don't see physicians. So I signed myself up, went and got it done, put on for an axillary ultrasound. And first they got done doing the mammogram and they said, everything looks great. I'm like, awesome, but I feel something in my armpits. And so the sonographer ultrasounded me and you could see the look in her face when she goes, oh yeah, you do have some enlarged lymph nodes. And then they bring the radiologist in to take a look. And then they're like, yeah, your lymph nodes are enlarged. It's probably from the COVID vaccine. So they said, we have options. One is I could just come back in 6 months and repeat the ultrasound, or I could have a biopsy. And so I, thought about it and I was like, I think I want the biopsy. So I said yes. And I immediately got in my car, went home and called Chris Hughey, who's a pediatric oncologist. And I said, hey, this is kind of a weird question. And he immediately was like, get the biopsy. Answer is always get the biopsy.
Yeah, for sure.
And then he asked me something where he goes, do you have any inguinal lymph nodes? And I kind of thought about it for a minute and I was like, you know what? I actually think I do. And I thought I was getting a hernia. And I really wasn't appreciating what was happening to me as being something that could be a lymph node change more so than a musculoskeletal issue. So after he said that, I was like, yeah, I do have an enlarged lymph node in my inguinal region. And so, so that just kind of sealed the deal that I was getting the biopsy.
Emotionally, were you gone at that point or?
Well, no, at that point, I still was we still are kind of holding on to that. I might just be having a reaction to the COVID vaccine,
Yeah.
And so, and because once again, it was so new. I mean, I was the second person in line to get the vaccine, so I was like, I'm getting this vaccine. So, we didn't know anything about it.
And that was one of the first things that came out was hey, you don't need to ultrasound every lymph node because this is a common thing.
Right.
Gotcha.
So I was still kind of just holding on to like hope that this is just a reaction. But after talking to my husband about it that night, he was trying to make me feel better and say like, it's probably not that. But I just kind of in the core kind of knew like, I think it is something. I think this is something real. So I got the biopsy done. And then like within 2 days, they called me and said, yes, it's lymphoma. So I went ahead and called Chris Hughey again. First person I called, didn't call my husband. I called him. I'm like, it's follicular lymphoma. So he's like, well, that's not like a traditional pediatric one. I can't tell you that much about it. But he gave me the name of, the person at WashU that's kind of known for treating lymphomas. But beyond that, like I had no idea what to do. So you were actually the next phone call after I told my family, though, too. So
I remember very well. It was early in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So of course, the initial night that I was told, the night that I was told that I actually had cancer, I actually went to a surgery center meeting and I sat through the meeting, actually. Like I didn't go home. I just sat through it and was just kind of just in la la land. And then I drove home and then told my family and drank a bottle of wine. And because at that point, and then we all do strange things when we're faced with mortality. And we made my funeral playlist. So like at that point I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. So like not knowing what to do, we were just like, we started playing music and I had a glass of wine and we just started kind of like, you don't know what you're going to do until you're in the middle of it, like how you're going to react. Is it going to be 100%. Tearful? Is it going to be scary? Is it, am I going to feel closer to God? Like you just don't know like what's going to happen at that point. And for me, like I think I was still mostly in denial though, because, I'm looking up information and still just, I just couldn't believe that was happening to me. So yeah, the next day you were the person that I called because I had met you at social events and you're the closest person that I knew to oncology.
I'm glad you called me.
And then you got me in with somebody the next day. And that was pretty amazing that it was that fast. And so, I went and met with the oncologist. He really didn't seem that excited by me though, too. And so that made me
Which
feel...
seems weird kind of, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm like, how is it that I can be not that exciting, but I have lymph nodes that are enlarged everywhere? And, he seemed very, very much like he was like, you're going to be fine. I'm like, okay. So he set me up for my PET scans. And then we waited for my staging then at that point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I always, I talked to somebody today who was like super healthy, like great shape, who ended up having like a serious cancer. And it just like, it's those people have the toughest time. Now, physically, they're in the best shape, to deal with it.
Right.
Because they've taken good care of themselves, but there's no justice to it.
Right.
I always say, your neighbor's drinking Busch Light and eating Funyuns and like doing fine. And you're eating kale every day and end up with cancer. It's like, this isn't supposed to happen.
Right. And then the biggest thing is like, you look for what did I do wrong? Like, why did this happen to me? Is it because I lived in California? I was exposed to things, like we used to have like, they would actually come in and do the crop dusting near where I lived.
Were you in
like,
Central Valley?
Yeah, the Bay Area.
Okay, gotcha.
But it was still like, they'd come and they would come and coat all of the olive trees and our cars would be covered with stuff. And that was just it. We'd be running around outside and playing. And so I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm from Northern California and this is where I grew up.
Yeah.
And ironically, my old partner, Teresa Knight, she's the first person that I joined when I got out of residency. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as well. And she's from Northern California, though, too. And she passed away at 49. So, like, there's always that, like, looming in my life where I'm like, wow, like we were very similar as far as like how we got to St. Louis. And then she was diagnosed and then she did pass away from it at 49. So,
and it's natural to try to, with anything in life, humans look for patterns.
Yes.
And sometimes you see, mirages and sometimes it's reality.
Yeah.
But in the midst of all that, we're not extremely rational.
Right.
And so it's hard to try to figure out what's up and down.
Oh, yes. And that's why, like, you put your story out there a lot to see, like, who connects with this, like, who has a similar story, though, too. And I actually met somebody that has my exact story, though, too, which was very interesting, though, too. And we've become friends, and we support each other, and we've taken different directions for how we're treated, and we compare, like, hers compared to mine. But it was, like, almost the exact same story, though, too. But you look for people that you have similar things going on that that can help support you, and you can support each other. But you do look for the similarities. Like, what's the similarity between us? Well, she's from California, or like, actually, I take it back. Her brother, who also had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, ironically enough, was from California, worked in farming also. So we're like, oh, maybe that's it. Like, maybe this is like something that has to do with like where we're from.
Yeah.
But then there's always the question of like, was it the COVID vaccine? Was it, just every little thing that we do? Like,
It could be radon gas from the caves in the limestone of Missouri.
Right. Is it because I chose the career that I chose? Because that's the other thing. That's the other thing that you start to note is, more than anything, they'll tell you have to take care of yourself, and you have to stop pushing yourself, pushing yourself to such stressful situations. And as an obstetrician, I'm up all night and I don't sleep.
Yeah.
But there's a huge, there's an unusually a large amount of physicians that get cancer, though, too. And then you start to wonder, though, too, is it because we put ourselves in this chronic state of inflammation? So there's like a little bit of guilt, like that I chose the career that I chose. Is it, is this like what made me potentially get this because I run at 11 all day long every day?
I'll throw this in for the listener. So your immune system does a really good job at keeping cancer away. And so your body can develop cancer cells, but your immune system typically kills them before it becomes, ever clinically evident. When you're an OB-GYN, you get up a lot in the middle of the night to deliver babies, and you have kind of this abnormal sleep schedule. Your sleep is very tied into your immune system. And so if you have poor sleep, then your immune system's not going to be as strong. And so that's what Julie's talking about here, is the connection between not sleeping, bad immune system, 100% cancer.
100% it. So when I went in to, have my second opinion, which is what everybody always says to do, go get a second opinion.
Sure.
That was the one thing that she said to me was like, you need to take care of yourself. Like, you need to sleep. And I'm like, oh, how do I do that, though? I like my job,
Yeah, you're like mid-career, right? You have kids and responsibility, and now you're trying to reshuffle everything.
Right. And I have tried to do that, though, too. I mean, sometimes I still kind of push myself back into the old ways, but I do try to protect sleep and try to make sure that my immune system is working as well as it can, though, too.
Yeah,
so,
whether that caused it or not, the right thing to do is to optimize all these things, right?
Right. But it just kind of goes back to the whole thing of like, you question everything. Like, why me? And is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. But, And I think we're all trying to kind of live an optimal life. And it's, if anything, suboptimal, I mean, we make suboptimal decisions every day. It's like, it's a good trait to take on personal responsibility for anything that's going on, but cancer's, unless you're smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, if it's a kind of a random cancer like this, that was, you have no idea what caused it. Could have just been a random mutation, probably was that caused it.
Yeah.
So follicular lymphoma. So when you went in, I'm sure you were expecting, you have this lymphoma, you're expecting to get kind of this treatment regimen and be on the chemo right away.
Right.
But most of the time you just watch it.
It is the weirdest thing in the world.
And so it's hard to believe an expert when they're saying, oh, no, you'll just keep an eye on it.
Right. And when they said that, it's watch and wait. I'm like, are you kidding me?
That doesn't feel good, right?
So like, I'm stage 3. Like, they're like, we're going to watch it. And I'm like, what do you mean we're going to watch this? Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
But then you really do read the literature and what everybody's doing. And you're like, yeah, you watch and wait. Because the reality is, like, I felt fine. Like, I felt totally fine, though, too. And even though, like, I could feel my lymph nodes and, they didn't hurt or anything like that. So we watched it for like a year and a half before we kind of were pushed to say, let's go ahead and start treatment.
So why were you pushed to start treatment?
Well, A couple different things. So one is I got a fantastic dermatologist. Her name's Anna Clark at St. Luke's. And she gave me a really thorough evaluation. And she's like, your back looks like a war zone, and biopsied multiple things on my back. So 2 of the 3 things she biopsied were cancer. One was a melanoma. One was a basal cell carcinoma. But the melanoma also had follicular lymphoma in it, though, too.
Wild.
So,
That's not normal, right?
Yeah, right. So, but melanoma does run in my family. So it's not a surprise, growing up in California, like we were
light-skinned.
Light-skinned. We used to put baby oil on and fry ourselves, because we just wanted a tan so bad. And I am not somebody that tans, but you don't know that, when you're a kid and you just think that it's so cool.
Yeah.
Melanoma
is also a very highly immunogenic cancer.
Yeah.
So renal cell melanoma and neuroblastoma are kind of classically known as being very sensitive to the immune system.
Doc Discussions with Dr. Jason Edwards. Brought to you by St. Luke's, St. Louis.
So when we got that back, I was like, and so I went to Dr. Fessler, my oncologist. And,
the best. He's the best.
Oh my God, I just love him. So he wasn't my original one, which my original one was fantastic, but he left also. And then I got Dr. Fessler, who's been fantastic and really lets me work at my pace. He doesn't push anything, and he kind of knows where I'm coming from. And he, that's why my girlfriend that has the same thing, we both had different treatment patterns because he let us do that because he knew that was probably what we needed though too. But so then I went back to Dr. Fessler and said, is this the strangest thing ever? I mean, I had my specimen sent off to Mayo. I'm like, are you sure this is it? And so sure enough, it was true. I had follicular lymphoma in my melanoma biopsy specimen. I got my melanoma treated, which was apparently we biopsied off the only melanoma I had. It wasn't even in my
Was it in situ or was it beyond? Okay, good.
Yeah. Good. So it was excised and all of that was taken care of. But then we decided we needed to do more imaging. And also along those lines, I could feel my lymph nodes getting bigger though too. Yeah. So that's my hands are a very good barometer, I think, for what's going on in my body. And so I could feel my lymph nodes were getting bigger though too, but still felt fine once again. And then I got another PET scan and it was in my bone marrow at that point. So at that point, I hit the qualification because of the size of my lymph nodes that they say, well, we should probably initiate treatment though too. So you give me the options and I went with a single agent because I knew that it had worked well and I could always go back and do it again if I needed to also.
Was it Rituxan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's one of those things the other thing that happens when you get cancer is you get onto all of these Facebook groups, which I kind of should never have done that. So
I agree. It selects because people who are doing well typically aren't spending much time on the message board.
Right.
So it pre-selects for all the bad cases.
Yes. But you hear all of these things where I was on Rituxan and this happened. And I had a patient that came in that said she went into cardiac arrest on it. I was like, oh my God. So at this point, I'm thinking that when I get Rituxan, I am going to have to take all this time off of work. And it wasn't like that for me at all.
Most people take it in stride.
Yeah. I mean, the first day I had it, I got steroids and I got Benadryl. And that's the only thing that kind of knocked me on my butt was the Benadryl made me sleep. So
and psychologically too. I mean, people kind of underestimate the mind and it's so powerful. But the day before that first treatment, you're not sleeping well. You've got a million things going through your mind. If you have any side effect at all, it will be amplified by your mind.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's in your head. Your head is very powerful.
Right.
And so people tend to be kind of, and I would be too. If my toe hurt the next day, I'd be like, oh my God, it's from the cancer or the treatment. They've noticed patterns that aren't real patterns.
Right.
But did you feel like you took the subsequent Rituxan treatments in stride?
Yeah, totally. So after the first one, I was like, it's not that bad. And I'm like, I was just sleepy. So they're like, well, we could cut back on the Benadryl. And then we ended up cutting back on the steroids though too. And I mean, honestly, Rituxan was like water for me. I drive myself home from the treatments by when I got to the end of it, I was like, this doesn't bother me at all. So then after, getting through all of my treatments, I had a repeat PET scan and it shrank, but it's still there. So, which is, it's fine. It's just one of those things that we'll just keep an eye on. And I've had a full body MRI since then also, and it's still just there, and it's not large enough that I need to have treatment again. But, next time around, I'll probably do different treatment options though too. But I just, wanted to get through this first. And also like my kids are young, and I wanted to get through high school and getting them into college before I start doing things that might really, you're always just scared that the treatment is going to knock you on your butt.
Yeah.
So before starting other new things, I'm like, I think I could do Rituxan, but next time I'll probably, add something onto that also.
Yeah. This reminds me of a couple things. I'm sure it was very frightening, especially having kids, who were in probably like junior high and high school at the time, or maybe high school.
Yeah, high school and junior high.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, well, how do you keep going? I mean, how do you keep being a mom? How do you keep having sympathy for your patients?
Yes.
And And I think people can adapt to almost anything. And I'm not, the original person who said that. I think it's like a Nietzschean quote, but it's like people do adapt. And, usually even just a few weeks into a diagnosis, you've somewhat come to grips with it.
Yeah.
And how do you feel like you did with that?
Well, I was so nervous about like how my kids are going to react to this. And that's what everybody is nervous about. Like when you have young kids is like, how's this going to affect their life though too? Like, are they going to be scared for me the whole time? And my kids are very different. I have a boy and a girl, and the boy, obviously doesn't say anything because boys keep all their emotions in. But my daughter was very much like, I mean, she and her girlfriends had, an F cancer party for me because they were, juniors in high school. And so they did all the things that they could do to lift spirits. And so that was her way of showing love and support. But I think that the best part of it was just being able to say the word cancer though, too. So, so it did get to the point where we could make jokes about it. And that's what I had to do. Just because I feel like the more I could say the word, the more they could say the word then too. And then they could talk about it then.
Yeah.
So, when it came to doing dishes, my kids never want to do dishes, but I'd be like, kids, it's your turn to do dishes. Mom has cancer, and they're they got to the point where they're like, okay, mom, it's getting old, so you just to be able to say stuff like that to them and know that it's joke and that I'm okay with it and that mentally I'm going to be fine with it was a very big thing though, too. And now they don't tolerate it at all though, too. They're like, we don't care if you have cancer. You come out and try to run a half marathon with us or whatever, they really they're beyond it now. So, but and then as far as from the physician standpoint of it, I do think it's made me more sympathetic and it's made me understand when my patients are nervous about stuff, waiting for things. And they're things that I would be like, I don't think this is a big deal. Your pap smear might be a little bit abnormal, but they're sitting at home perseverating about it.
Yeah.
And I understand that so much better now though, too. Yeah. And then also the fear that they have when they get diagnosis. There's been several times I've called my patients after they have breast cancer diagnoses and kind of say, look, this is how it's going to go. And being able to kind of give them some guidance for that has, I feel been very beneficial for me as a clinician, being able to help other people. The person that helped me, her name is Beth Gearhart. She was one of my partners.
Sure.
And she had gone through something similar though too. And as soon as she found out I was diagnosed, she's like, okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to bring this pad of paper with you and write down all your questions before and make sure your husband goes with you and then go get your second opinion. And she scripted, what are you supposed to do when you get cancer? And it was so helpful, having a very motherly figure like that helping me with that because nobody had ever really gone through anything like that in my family. And they didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do.
So that's what your advice would be? If you were so somebody's listening who just got diagnosed,
yes.
what would you tell them to do?
Yes, take a breath.
Yeah.
It'll be okay. And when you go to visit your doctor, definitely bring somebody else with you because you don't hear everything that they're saying though too. And you could do some research before you come in and have your questions ready for you though too.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to get a second opinion. And if you're not jiving with your doctor, it's okay to get a different doctor though too. If you have any any reservations that like the person, that you're talking to is, too busy for you or just doing protocol or you just don't feel that connection to, it's okay to get another doctor.
100%. It should not feel weird.
Yeah.
It should not feel weird. If it does feel weird, it's definitely, I mean, St. Louis is full of great doctors and great hospitals.
Right.
And you can't throw a rock without hitting one.
Right.
And so like you have a lot of great options.
Right.
And it's not dating, but it's kind of like that. Like
Right.
it should kind of work together.
Right. Yes.
Because it's a long relationship.
It is. So that's, that's the major advice is don't be afraid to get a second. Actually, I almost encourage you to get a second opinion because otherwise you're always going to wonder if you're doing the right thing though too. But
there's one scenario where I tell patients it's probably a bad idea to get a second opinion. And that's when, and it's not often, but it's when you have a cancer that's growing very quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And
you're
like you need to do
move.
something today. And I've had patients to say, well, I've got an appointment with Cleveland Clinic in 3 weeks. And I'm told them, you don't have 3 weeks.
Yeah, right.
And usually they almost always listen to that.
Right.
And it's a rare scenario, but usually it's like very obvious that's the case.
Right.
And so, but otherwise, no downside. The other thing I'll say too is with artificial intelligence, I mean, a lot of these are great. And if you kind of put in like a very detailed description of what you have, you're probably going to get a very accurate output. And I would tell people not to Google or just do a search, but AI is different. And it usually hits the nail on the head. Yeah.
But I feel like with the kind of cancer that I have, it is all across the board for what everybody does. Now, breast cancer, and you could tell
me
different.
Very formulaic.
It is. Yeah. And that's, I had a patient that called the other day and she's like, well, I'm going to go get a second opinion at Missouri Baptist because my sister had a cancer and was treated by this person. And I'm like, really? Like, you're probably going to get the same answer everywhere you go for this,
100%.
though, too. So you just have to go with who you feel the most comfortable with.
Exactly.
But the reality is something as common as breast cancer. Unfortunately, too many people have breast cancer. There's enough protocol out there that most people go by protocol.
There's a boatload of clinical trials.
Right.
And so it's very clear what to do.
Right.
And so, per stage.
Right.
And then, when you find something nuanced like this, you want I think you want somebody who's treated a lot of it.
Right.
And volume.
And that's exactly why I'm like happy seeing Mark Fessler though too, because he is our lymphoma guy.
Super smart, very nice. And also like that's basically all he does is hematologic malignancies.
Right. And then going back to the whole Facebook thing, you get onto, one of these, Facebook lymphoma survivor group things, and you hear their stories about them. I'm like, who is treating you? There's so many times where I'm like, this is so not like what I would consider normal. And they all talk about all of these crazy treatments that they've had. And I'm like, wow, like if you think that that's normal, maybe it is for where you are.
Or maybe there's something they're leaving out.
Right.
That happens too.
Right. But there are a lot of questions that even I don't understand sometimes. Why do some people have bone marrow biopsies for what I have and other people don't? Mm-hmm. Considering what their stage is
age probably plays a lot into it, the management too, for your specific cancer, because you're young and I haven't seen that many young people with follicular lymphoma. Usually patients are in their 70s or 80s.
Right. Yeah.
Which you manage totally differently because their life expectancy is kind of max 10 or 15 years.
Right.
Where that's not the case with you.
Right.
We've got a lot of years we have to protect, so you got to kind of be a little bit more thoughtful.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure all these people on Facebook have had other reasons why they went to R-CHOP, which is, their type of chemo that they had versus, something different. But that's what I have seen is that it seemed like it was all across the board for what people's treatment was. So for me, just being able, the thing that I did is I looked up all these studies and I went in and I, talked to Dr. Fessler, and actually before I even spoke to him about what I think I wanted to do, he actually cited all of the papers before I even said oh, well, okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm checking off my boxes as I go though too. So everything that, I had come in there kind of going but this study said this, he already knew, and it was Bible to him. So I felt very comfortable with that, but it was all across the board. So that's where I just kind of go, I don't know if AI would work for this particular one, but
but my guess is it would kind of give you a bunch of options and give some context to it.
Yeah.
And so how has this changed your perspective on life? And you talked a little bit about your priorities with work and stuff like that.
Well, initially, you go, well, I'm going to work less. Like that's everybody's answer, right? I'm going to work less. So, so I went to the powers that be here. I'm like, cut my salary. I'm not going to work as much. Yeah. That sounded really good in theory. And, I just don't, it's just not possible for an OB to like really just cut back because it always ends up kind of like building back up again. But it would be horrible if I hated my job to begin with, but I really enjoy my job though too. Yeah. So even though I was like, I'm going to travel more and I'm going to be more present, my job is such a part of my identity that like 100%. For me to say I'm going to step away from that, then I kind of go, well, what else would I do?
Yeah. I knew somebody with terminal cancer, and they kept going all the way till the end, and they were young, and it's what they wanted to do.
It also distracts me though too.
Yeah. So the alternative, I mean, this is one thing I very much tell patients to do. Keep working if you can. And for 3 reasons. Physically, you're more active. Sitting on the couch, or think, oh, I'm going to work out or whatever. You don't. And then psychologically, sitting home on the couch and thinking about it is horrible.
Right.
Like you need useful distractions.
Yes.
And then, for most people, financially, like there is no stress like financial stress. Right. And if you can keep that check coming in, all 3 of those things make your life better. Right. And so even though plenty of people out there say, I hate my job, like, it's like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill. Like you need the boulder, believe it or not. It doesn't feel like it, but you do.
Right. So I still work. I have actually found a love for travel, so I do want to do that more, but I'm trying to figure out how to balance that with my job a little bit more though too. But I've always kind of vowed, like anything that has to do with my kids, like I always want to be there though too. Yeah. So I still, made it to all the hockey games. I, still went on the college tours. I'll move my son in, to college this summer though too. So all of that stuff, I want to be there, and it's very, very important for me. And that's the most important thing though too. But you mend fences though too. Like, so the people that you have had, conflict with in your family, like nothing makes you talk more than telling them that you have cancer. Yeah. And suddenly everything's okay. And
everything seems pretty small, right?
It does seem very small. So that part of it, not that cancer's ever a great thing, but it does make you, have this conversation with your family, and then you start talking again somewhat regularly, checking in with each other though too. So that part of it like has been beneficial though too. And I feel like you just have more grace. You give everybody more grace though too, because the things that are really important are like very clear to you now. And if somebody comes in all hot because, you're running behind or they didn't want to pay a copay, like I feel like I handle that kind of stuff so much better now because I'm like, you know what? In the scope of my day, this ain't that bad.
Small potatoes, right? Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, that's really true. Talking about mending fences made me think of a lot of, especially when the AIDS epidemic hit, you had a lot of people, from small towns or the Midwest who had gone to the coasts and then they got sick and they kind of came back to their small towns and had conversations with their parents and kind of maybe solidified these relationships that may not have ever been solidified. Right. And so like through kind of the harshness of disease, you do see beautiful things,
right?
If you keep your eyes open.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of what I wrote about in that last, I had that Facebook post about raising money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, is that like it really, you do see the small things. Like, I mean, when you go to the infusion center and you see these people that are just volunteering just to volunteer, just to make you feel better, like it really does bring like a tear to your eye. Like when you're like, wow, like you're just doing this because you're just selfless and you want to help other people. And you see that so much more clearly though, like when you're on this side of it though too. So, and like the day you came and sat with us though too, like it really, I'll probably tear up from this though too. It like meant more to me than, like anything. So
I was really, really sad, when you called and told me that. And you just want to do anything you can to help somebody out and to, any little thing. And so,
right.
It's, and especially you being so young. I mean, it was really hard for me to hear that had happened.
Right.
And but you're right. I mean, there's beauty all around us. You just gotta you just gotta look for it.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right.
On that note,
Julie, thanks so much. Sure. I appreciate
Anytime.
your openness.
Anytime.
And,
I'm glad to share my story, and I hope it helps other people too.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Join us next time for Doc Discussions with Dr. Jason Edwards. It's medicine for your body, mind, and spirit.